In our last episode, Dr. Seth Segall reminds us that when it comes to attachment, it's not about never having close human relationships. What are the teachings on attachment? Today, we look at some of those teachings. Hi, it's Margaret Maloney, and welcome to Season 3 of the Death Dhamma podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so appreciative that you are part of my community. And yet, I seek not to be attached to the idea of the podcast or even to the idea of our community. And that's our topic this season: attachment, clinging, and aversion. What happens when we really want something? What happens when we really don't want something? And what does it do to our suffering and dissatisfaction? Let's dive in and find out a little bit more with today's episode. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the origination of dukkha, the craving that makes for further becoming, accompanied by passion and delight, relishing now here and now there, craving for sensual pleasure, craving for becoming, craving for non-becoming, from the Samyutta Nikaya. Today we consider some of the teachings on attachment, or in Pali, tanha. We have an entire season dedicated to this topic, and as we engage in self-reflection and interesting discussions, it is helpful to look at some of the relevant suttas. Let's circle back to tanha and dukkha. If this sticky, uncouth craving overcomes you in the world, your sorrows grow like wild grass after rain. If, in the world, you overcome this uncouth craving, hard to escape, sorrows roll off you like water beads off a lotus. And here's a second passage. If its roots remain undamaged and strong, a tree, even if cut, will grow back. So too, if latent craving is not rooted out, this suffering returns again and again. Both of the above verses come from the Dhammapada. Some observations. Observation 1 is, if your cravings control you, you will experience much sorrow. And observation 2, if you control your cravings, you will have less difficulty. I think we know the truth of this, like we know it intellectually, we know it logically, and on some days we know it, we feel it emotionally, right? That wanting, that craving, and also that aversion, wanting things, not wanting other things. When things don't go our way and we really have strong feelings about what we want or how we want things, it is difficult, right? It is difficult. And life is challenging to navigate anyway. But none of this is a promise that if you conquer cravings, you'll never have difficulty. It means you will navigate those difficulties more skillfully, right? So on this day, was last week, I think, where I wanted to be able to get in my car and drive somewhere, but I had a flat tire, and I was really not wanting to have a flat tire because I didn't want to, have to pay for it, find another way to get to where I was going, worry about being late. And so for a little minute, I was having a stress cycle, an upset around all of that. And then I realized, well, you have the flat tire. So, this my infamous saying, this is how it is. And I need to let go of what I want and, formulate a new plan, and quickly, because it was a job. I needed to get to work. And so I needed to try to find a way to abandon my, craving and wishes that I didn't have a flat tire and all of that. And, that's a small example, but again, none of this is a promise that if you conquer cravings, you'll never have difficulties. It does mean I could have avoided some of that, emotional spike of stress and upset and just moved on to the tire is flat. What am I going to do? How am I going to navigate this? But true abandonment of craving does make us more open to the experience of enlightenment. Consider the Samaditi Sutta, the Discourse on Right View from the Majjhima Nikaya. In this sutta, Sariputta is teaching the monks about right view. And you recognize right view as the first of the Noble Eightfold Path. In this sutta, Sariputta says, okay, so first, with regard to the Four Noble Truths, he says, when, friends, a noble disciple understands suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And then later, he goes on, and what is suffering? What is the origin of suffering? What is the cessation of suffering? What is the way leading to the cessation of suffering? Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Sickness is suffering. Death is suffering. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are suffering. Not to obtain what one wants is suffering. In short, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging are suffering. This is called suffering. And then he goes on. And what is the origin of suffering? It is craving, which brings renewal of being. It is accomplished by delight and lust, and delights in this and that. That is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for being, and craving for non-being. This is called the origin of suffering. Then, more specifically, he discusses clinging and craving separately, 2 separate passages, a passage for clinging and a passage for craving. So let's start with the passage for clinging. And what is clinging? What is the origin of clinging? What is the cessation of clinging? What is the way leading to the cessation of clinging? There are these 4 kinds of clinging. Clinging to sensual pleasures, clinging to views, clinging to rituals and observances, and clinging to a doctrine of self. With the arising of craving, there is the arising of clinging. With the cessation of craving, there is the cessation of clinging. The way leading to the cessation of clinging is just this noble eightfold path. That is right view, right concentration, etc. The noble eightfold path. So 4 things we cling to: sensual pleasures, views, rituals, and observances, and self. Thoughts of self, thoughts of who we are. And Seth mentioned this in his discussion with us in season 3, episode 3. And of craving, Sariputta says. And what is craving? What is the origin of craving? What is the cessation of craving? What is the way leading to the cessation of craving? There are these 6 classes of craving. Craving for forms, craving for sounds, craving for odors, craving for flavors. I want that chocolate. Okay, the I want that chocolate isn't what Sariputta said. I think you know that, though. Craving for tangibles, craving for mind objects. With the arising of feeling, there's the arising of craving. With the cessation of feeling, there is the cessation of craving. The way leading to the cessation of craving is just this noble eightfold path. So we crave forms, sounds, odors, flavors, objects, mind objects. And when feelings arise, craving arise. This doesn't mean that we become robots. We don't become unfeeling beings. It is all about watching those feelings arrive and seeing craving stem from that when it does, and working with it. So, I threw in the joke about flavors and craving for chocolate. And so if that feeling arises, maybe when I get bored, I crave a snack, and I crave that snack to be chocolate. That doesn't mean I have to be owned by that craving, but I need to become aware and then work with it, right? Now, another example. So right now, one of my cats is sitting on my desk, playing with my pens and chewing on paper. I don't know why, but he loves to chew on paper. I have placed him on the floor more than once. Okay, and here he comes right now. I just put him on the floor and encouraged him to go do something else. Here he is. So I'm now clinging to this view that I can't make this podcast for you because if you hear my cat, you will think I'm unprofessional. Okay, so I'm clinging to a view and I'm clinging to this sense of myself right there. You could say I'm craving for silence. or I'm having an aversion to the sound of my cat. Although there are other times, like when I walk in the door, I'm very happy to hear a greeting from one or both of my cats. In fact, if they do not greet me, I go and look for them. Now, I understand this example may seem trivial, and I don't mean it to be trivial. I offer it up as an opportunity to observe how craving and clinging and aversion are active within me. All good opportunities for my attachment journal and for my progress on the path. And all these teachings, or are these all the teachings? Sorry about that. Are these all the teachings? No. This is a great place for us. I'll say a good base for our continued time together, something for us to contemplate in our lives, to build on. So let's work with this. And in future episodes, of course, we're going to explore this more deeply. I would love to hear from you, your thoughts, your suggestions, your own stories about attachment. So follow this link, I'm going to read it to you in a minute here, to leave me a 90-second message with your ideas and suggestions. You can go to https://www.speakpipe.com/death_Dhamma_podcast. I suppose you could also just use your favorite search engine to say SpeakPipe Death Dhamma Podcast. And there you can record an audio message for me. And be sure to come over to margaretmaloney.com. That's MargaretMeloni.com and join the community.
You've been listening to the Death Dhamma Podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmaloney.com, MargaretMeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.